Let's get it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our February Microsoft 365 Champion Community Call. As if you've noticed, we're in our new environment. I have a slide that's going over that. But yes, very excited to see you all and be back and see everyone's locations and say hi. Okay, so first of all, here's our digital event code of conduct. All in all, just be nice, be welcoming in this environment. And if you wanted to know more about what our event code of conduct is, please visit ak.ms/code of conduct or click the link on the screen. Here's our agenda today. I have a couple announcements, your favorite top Microsoft 365 updates. We have a very special guest today, Mark Cashman.
Woohoo!
And he is one of our colleagues in our MCAG team, as well as a themed figure in his Intrigued podcast. He recently helped host a SharePoint event, and he has various SharePoint demos that he's going to share with us today. So very excited to have him with us today. And then, of course, lastly, your open discussion forum where you can ask us or Mark your questions. All right, so our new call format starting this month, February 2025. Again, we're listening to your feedback. So all the prior months when we asked for your feedback on the prior call formats, this new call format, anything you want to see, any of your feelings, and etc. I know a lot of you told me that your company didn't allow YouTube, etc. And we took all of that into account, and we fought hard. This team, as well as Mark as well, all fought for this. So again, happy to have you all back in Teams. So this announcement is that it's returning to Microsoft Teams via Microsoft Teams webinar. Will still be available on demand on the Microsoft Tech community, as well as a community learning YouTube channel within 48 hours after the call. Call join times are exactly the same as before, 8:05, 5:05 Pacific time. Call links are on screen. And then if you don't already have access to our presentations, our previous call recordings, you can have your colleagues or yourselves join the Microsoft 365 Champions program at ak.ms/m365 Champions. All right, so SharePoint event. I'm sure Mark will talk more about this later on, but this was a SharePoint event that ended last month, end of month. But it was a great event. Tons and tons of great product team demos came out about SharePoint. There was Jeff Teeper made a great appearance. He had a blog on it. There's a learning series. There's how to uplevel your SharePoint IQ. And the adoption.microsoft.com team made a great page on it. So you can also visit that page at ak.ms/SharePoint event. Next, Microsoft 365 Community Conference. Join us in Las Vegas, Nevada, May 6th through 8th. If you don't already know, this is, I feel like this is the third year going already, so it's almost considered an annual event. That's one of our major events of the year, the Microsoft 365 Community Conference. It's going to be tons of engineers, Microsoft 365, enthusiasts, MVPs, super fans, of course, Microsoft employees, and others all around the world. Tickets are limited, so make sure you claim your spot at ak.ms/m365con25. Feel free to click on the link. So guests that'll be there from featured Microsoft speakers that'll be there, Jeff Teeper, Caruana, our manager, Adam Harmons, Nicole, Jared, and tons of other Microsoft speakers, various people from our team are going to be there as well. So feel free to check us out and visit us and meet with us there. So yes. Alrighty. Next, the Microsoft community. Within this, the MGCI, Microsoft Global Community Initiative community calls. So these are hosted by our lovely colleague, Heather Cook. They last had a call with Adrius, and he talked about how to basically essentially optimize your video setup for the best video output, for calls, for video production. And all in all, if you don't know what GCI is all about, it's all about basically wanting to learn more about either how to get locally involved in your local community with events, how to produce hybrid or virtual events. And so these are all free calls, just like the Champions program. If you wanted to learn more about MGCI, how to join, how to attend our monthly calls, you can visit ak.ms/mgci. Alrighty, adoption.microsoft.com updates. Let's welcome Miss AMC Jessie.
There we go. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be back on Teams and having this interaction again. So, if you don't know, my name is Jessie Huang. I work on the customer advocacy group and I manage all of adoption on Microsoft.com. This is your one-stop shop for user enablement resources, deployment resources, skilling content. If you don't know where to find it, start here. So, I go over some highlights of updates we made since the last time we talked. And since last month, we've got quite a few new pages up. As Tiffany mentioned, we have the SharePoint event page that supported the SharePoint event that happened just at the end of last month. There's the on-demand video up there. There are demo videos you can watch as well. And of course, there's a SharePoint hackathon that's related to, connected to that event. Be sure to go check it out. Go join the hackathon. There's going to be some really crazy awesome stuff happening there, and Mark's gonna get into it a little bit later. We also updated the MGCI advisors. As Tiffany said, MGCI is all around the world and they're regional leaders in all different parts of the world, so we've added some location details so it's easier for you to try and find someone that's more local to you. This next one, a lot of folks have been asking for it, updated translated versions of the Copilot Success Kit, which we finally got done. I know that was a long time coming. I will say that it is not a fully apples to apple because we had to stop the updates at a certain point in order to get them translated. But it is an updated one from, I believe, end of December. So that's on the Copilot Success Kit page. You can click on the link on the slide. There are 9 languages in addition to the US English version. For Copilot Sales, we have a new click-through demo. It's pretty neat. Go check it out. It'll guide you through extensibility scenarios for Copilot Sales or Copilot for Sales, and it's in the extend and optimize area under there. So check it out and see, maybe this is a good thing for you all. We've been trying to lean into more accessibility scenarios on AMC. That's adoption on Microsoft.com. And one of a new guide that we released was the non-native English speaker day in the life guide. So for I know a lot of folks, this English is not their first language, but there are ways that you can use M365 and of course Copilot to help your day-to-day stuff. So check that out as well. And then accessibility is also a new filter up on the All Up Guides page. We got a lot of feedback about having resources in different spots and not being able to find all the Copilot chat and agent user engagement resources. So we pulled all those. They sit on a separate page with all the rest of the user engagement. And these are like onboarding emails, manager handouts, user handouts, that kind of stuff. We pull the Copilot chat ones into the Copilot chat and agent starter kit page. So when you land there, you can find everything in one go. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense now. But if not, do let us know. We will have a feedback link in the chat about the call, but you can send us anything there. And lastly, this one, there's no direct link in here, but if you look at the trainer drop-down menu at the top of the site, there's now a new one called Microsoft Deployment Resources. And it's what it sounds like, deployment resources, but the key is these are leader focused. So these are for leaders, folks that sit in leadership, business decision makers. What do they need to know about deploying services or any apps to their org? So there's going to be resources there, and we're working very closely with them to integrate their content into adoptionofmicrosoft.com and vice versa. And as always, you can check out our release notes for more details or subscribe to our RSS feed. Back to you, Tiffany. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jessie. Appreciate it. Yes, everyone check out adoption.microsoft.com. They update twice a week now. So much good content, basically anything Microsoft. And if you wanting to learn more about the product, how to adopt it, how to learn about it, all on adoption.microsoft.com. That's probably the first place I would start whenever I research anything Microsoft. So all right, top Microsoft 365 updates. First, Copilot Prompt Gallery app. This is a new app that helps basically users discover, share, basically congregate and be able to pick out their favorite prompts. And this is going to be native to the Teams app as well as the Microsoft 365.com, as well as Outlook. And yeah, so you can see my picture. It'll be rolling out in February. It'll be available basically, hopefully by end of month. So we should be almost there. You can click on the link here to learn more. But again, happy that we don't have to like migrate to another place. So now you're going to be able to use Copilot and have the prompting all in one space. Alrighty, so next, the new calendar in Teams is now generally available. If you haven't checked it out yet, this is an opt-in experience, so you can always opt out via the toggle on the right upper hand side. But essentially, the new calendar in Teams, the updates include a unified calendar experience between Outlook and Teams, expanded calendar views. I think there's monthly, there's split view, there's others as well, and then there's also customization. One of my favorite features is that now you're able to access the recap version by just like right-clicking on that meeting and just again less clicks to get to what you want. So yeah, so if you wanted to see what that's about when the rollout's basically already complete, it's generally available. But what are the different changes are, you can click on that link on our slide to learn more. Next, Microsoft Teams super resolution feature. This is really cool because for me, I've been, sadly, sometimes I don't have the best network conditions. And if I'm not in Teams and somewhere else, then my video gets cut, my audio gets laggy. It's a whole funky thing out there. But within Teams, what Teams does is they prioritize your audio. And then obviously, sometimes if, they had to pick and choose, they would have your video quality go down. But this new feature called Super Resolution, it's currently in public preview and will be generally available in March. There's a 30-second video that basically does a demo of this in my link right here. So essentially, these two guys are in 360p view, pretty low video quality. Once you turn on Super Resolution, then AI actually enhances the video resolution, producing this improved video. I think it's pretty helpful if you know you're going to be not at home, somewhere else with not as great network condition. You can turn this on and at least have better video quality than you would have not had. All right, so feel free to check out that feature. Lastly, of the Microsoft 365 updates, Viva Goals retirement. I wanted to make sure everyone saw this. I know we talked about this last month, but again, it's a pretty big update that Viva Goals will be retired end of this year, December 31st, 2025. There's not going to be any feature updates essentially after last year and last December. Microsoft still fully is committed to the Viva Suite. We're continuing to innovate consistently and constantly in the Viva Suite. But if you wanted to learn more about why we did this change, why we decided to retire it, what our guidance is, and feel free to check out these two links on our slide to learn more. Alrighty, without further ado, I'm going to welcome our guest speaker, Mark Cashman. Drumroll, drumroll, drumroll. Hi, Mark. Are you on mute?
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I'm unmuted and absolutely ready to share a ton. So it's really great to see your energy, Jesse and Tiffany, getting back to Microsoft Teams webinar. And I can see in the chat it's active, and also from this morning, I think it's a resounding great to be back. So it's great to be here. I certainly am not shy to the Champions program. I've been championing it and helping to get out the socials and share everything that Tiffany and Jesse program month over month. But thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit more about SharePoint. I have to ask you before you disappeared, Tiff. Oh, you disappeared.
I disappeared. Sorry.
How much do you love SharePoint? How much do you love SharePoint?
I think SharePoint's really cool. I think previously people were like, oh, it could be better. But now with the new changes after the SharePoint event, it's like up here, flexible sections, agents. We're in the new era, and so I'm all for it. So again, really happy.
All right. Well, you heard it here on the Champions program from somebody who maybe compared to myself is new to SharePoint. I've got some SharePoint grays. But really, the work that the team has been doing, doubling down on the SharePoint experience, integrations across the Microsoft 365 apps, it's all here in what we call internally the Ferris wheel. So hop on, enjoy the ride, enjoy the view. There are so many great applications that are powered by SharePoint. You can see a lot of them here. And it is also both an application and a platform. We're going to focus most of today to talk about it as an application because SharePoint also powers itself. And we're going to dive into agents, We're going to see a little bit of the experience around what it looks like to work with pages. More recently with some of the updates around flexible sections and the different ways that you can build out your pages and your sites. I dropped the link again, if you didn't click on it, to the SharePoint event, because that event has a lot of things in it. If you go to that microsite, you'll see the full event that includes the AMA that we had. There's also a new 5-part learning series where you can learn all about SharePoint pages, lists, and libraries. There's a focused session on automation. And of course, for IT pros, there's a nice deeper dive into some of the new innovation around what's good and available for admins. So there's a lot there, including a couple of new customer case studies. So hit that microsite, use it, abuse it, share it. It's got a lot of great information, and it'll really get you up to speed on more than what I'll have time to share here. So without belaboring that, let me take control so that we can navigate through a couple of SharePoint slides. The first one being is really an explanation of what we're going to talk about. There's this connective tissue, deep connective tissue when you think of the whole of Microsoft 365 Copilot. But now, instead of just being a content service that provides this grounded kind of knowledge base of where a lot of your information when you query through Copilot, no matter where you're at, a lot of that content is stored in SharePoint, so there's that connection. But we're also starting to build Copilot experiences inside of SharePoint. The one that I'll show you today we call SharePoint Agents, and that's on the right-hand side, really the logo or the icon that we have for broader agents. And some of what you can do in Copilot Studio, you can now do natively in a few clicks right inside of SharePoint itself. To put a little lens on what SharePoint looks like these days, if you've not yet recently built out a page or a portal of your own, or if somebody else has and you've benefited from that and getting great information, great news, great insights into various campaigns and projects. These are 4 examples of the types of sites that you can now design with SharePoint. And it's the layouts, it's the themes, it's the web parts, and of course it's your information front and center, being able to curate in a way that it makes sense for how people consume and learn about what it is that you do, so that you have these broader landing pages, but also more targeted experiences like what I'll show you with SharePoint Agents, because SharePoint Agents, now generally available, give you an opportunity to have an assistant that helps you within the site. If people are visiting your site, they now have a way to engage with the SharePoint agent, so they can ask questions. They can be very targeted. You can have multiple agents on a site, and of course you can have thousands of sites with many, many thousands of agents. So you're in control of what you want your agent to be pointed at. And there also is the ability to then take that agent into a Teams conversation. And so we'll show you a little bit of that as well. But to get into it, it's more fun to see it than just to hear about it. So we'll switch over into demo mode, and then we will see SharePoint agents in action. So I will clear out this. What you're seeing here is a standard SharePoint team site that's connected to Teams, and it's also a part of a SharePoint hub site. That's what you'll see up here, these various other sites that it's connected to. But I'm going to just ground us in the fact that this is a SharePoint site. I've got my home page here that we'll walk through in a second. But if you look up on any SharePoint site, as long as you are now investing in Copilot, and we can talk through the nuance of a promotion that we have going on, but also if you're invested in Microsoft 365 Copilot, you will start to see various Copilot experiences, not just in SharePoint, but across the Microsoft 365 applications. So within SharePoint, you'll know you have it and can use it by looking up in the upper right next to our Next Steps button that you might have known is the Copilot button. If I click into it, I'll see on this site a number of different SharePoint agents that exist. This is the one that I've had for a while, and this is in the context of a podcast that I run called The Intrazone. So this bot helps me, this agent helps me take questions that people might have about the show, so that if I enable people to get to this site or they go here on their own, they can go into this Copilot experience and ask these questions. And you see, I've actually tailored what are some of the questions that you might have that are the frequently asked questions. So who do I contact about the future episode? And I'll click into this so you can see it populates, and then you press send. You might want to add a little bit of additional context. It'll go, and instead of just looking at this entire site, I've programmed this down to just the blogs that I write for the Intrazone. And so within this folder that I have where all the blogs live, it's about 200 plus blogs. it now has a wealth of information about the InterZone. And you can see it gave out my details here, which are free to use. I'm not shy to the world. And of course, my co-host, Chris McNulty. If you know Chris, if you ever see him at an event, make sure you make a sports reference of some sort. But you get the idea of how it works. So the more interesting thing is, well, how do you make it work? So let's go through the steps of creating an agent. And effectively, this is what you do in a couple of clicks, and you can spend time refining it, of course, like any other application. But by default, it's going to ask you to create an agent for the entire site, not your entire intranet. You're already scoped to just the site that you're starting from. So if I want to, I can get right on it and start using it. Or I can go into edit mode, which will load up a lightweight Copilot Studio instance. What you're seeing here is effectively us tabbing into parts of Copilot, so you can do it in a few clicks without coding. I can change the name, so I'm going to make this the M365 Champs agent. We can change the logo, we can update the description so that when people come to it for the first time, they'll have a better understanding. And then you can kind of see what it starts to look like. This is a preview, a functional preview. But let me change one thing. I'm going to go into the actual site, and I'm going to choose a different specific document library to actually ground this agent in. So I'm going to go up to the parent level of the InterZone site, and you'll see I created a new document library called Contracts Demo. And if I select that, different than the other agent, which is pointed to a singular folder of all my blogs, this is now in the context of pointing at a set of contracts or a set of whatever material. And you can have multiple libraries. As you can see, I can add more. And coming soon, what they've announced recently within our SharePoint learning series, CJ Tan did mention that we're going to be enabling the connection to lists as well. So all of the SharePoint goodness, lists, libraries, pages, it's all a part of the future. So now that we've grounded it, I'm not really going to change too much just for the sake of time, but I can do a quick test and I can see if I can create a FAQ based on these resources. We'll see what it spits out, a little bit of a gamble on live demos, but you'll see this is a place for me to test the agent before I release the agent. And it sees that it's going to create question 1, question 2 through question 6. What are the contract details for the project? The answer, the contract specifies a 12-month term starting from January 1st, 2024. So it's working. I like it. I'm going to click Save. And now when I get out of the edit mode and I go back into the actual site, I want to show you one more thing, that if you click down here where it says where the agent is saved, it'll open up a different part of this site. I'm still within the InterZone site. And you can see here is the new agent that I created, and it's kind of a double agent, a secret agent for that matter. But it's called the M365 Champs agent.agent. And the point that I want to make here is it is just a file in SharePoint. It's manageable like any file in SharePoint. You can report on it like any file in SharePoint. You can, in fact, delete it. You can do all these things up here that you would expect to do with a file in SharePoint. It is just a manifest file. It's a tiny little file, and there's lots of things that you can do with it. But for the most part, most people will then see it as an element here. Here it is. There's that same preview that we saw. It's now functioning in production. And if I didn't do so much heady explaining, you would see that it's truly just in a few clicks. But let me switch back over to Ask IZ. And one thing that you can do from here also is you can copy this link for Teams. And we did this before, again, just to save a little bit of time. I'm going to go to the chat that I had for this event and scroll back a little bit so you can see when we were asking IZ, which is InterZone, I added it to the conversation, which is what you see here. And then I don't know if you can see the InterZone logo, but this is the actual bot. If I hover over it, this is the people profile card for the SharePoint agent Ask IZ, what permissions are set, all the things you might want to learn about it. Once it's a part of the conversation, you can ask it a question. Hey, Ask IZ, what's X, Y, or Z? And in this case, we asked one of those frequently asked questions. Here are the 3 most recent episodes, and this is one that actually Ben called out, thank you, Ben, in the chat, that we just released, which is this first one, SharePoint Agents in the Wild, kind of a meta point of what we're talking about because it's all about SharePoint agents. One is really about customer scenarios. The second half of this same episode was with our legal department, who put a SharePoint agent in production on our broad legal portal within Microsoft and enabled initially about 3,500 end users, those were our sales field, so they could ask questions for legal terms of when they're working on various contracts with our Microsoft customers. So that is SharePoint agents in a nutshell. I'm going to stop sharing just so we can jump back to a few slides, and I'm going to try to train myself from what I didn't do very well this morning, which was to take control of the presentation. So if we can bring back the presentation, if it's already in here, probably something that I can do. I'm going to take control, and then I'm going to navigate us over to the next section, which is really to talk about some of the things that you can do from an agent's perspective when you think of it as these various scenarios. If you listen to that episode of the Interzone, you'll hear all of these in context from a great researcher, our colleague Matt Wolodarski. But really, these are here to just give you concepts of what it is that you might use SharePoint agents for. You saw it in my example of maybe taking a little bit of pressure off of me answering every question somebody had about the podcast. And in this context, the HR folks, the folks on your legal teams, even marketing, everybody has access to a SharePoint site at some fashion. And within that site, there's a lot of knowledge. How do you share that knowledge without you having to be the middle person all the way through every time? SharePoint agents. So with those scenarios in mind, this is a great one to read in depth that will just give you a lot of focus beyond the how do they work to what are they. So switching gears a little bit to spend a couple minutes on the recent page authoring and site updates that we have. Our big focus is around making it easy, simple authoring, making it more beautiful and functional so that you can really design what it is that you want the experience to be for simple pages, news articles, or broader sites with all of the things that you do inside them, section layouts, theming, and of course the content. And the intent is making sure that people can engage with you and your site. So really focusing on what it is that the team can do to make things more engaging, make things more dynamic. That has been real focus. So the one thing I want to show you, going back to demo, is to share a little bit about what the team has been doing around flexible layouts. So I'm going to move this out and get us into a page that I've already created so that we can save a little bit of time so you can see essentially a flexible layout in action. And hopefully see, even just by looking at it the first time, you'll see that things are a little bit overlapping. Maybe they're closer than you're used to if you've been using SharePoint for a while, because it's been in the modern era for some time now. But they've turned the crank a little bit more and given you a lot more flexibility. So like a good yoga pose, maybe at the end of the day, we're going to do a couple of child poses and downward dogs. We're going to see the SharePoint flexibility through flexible sections. So what I'm going to do is clean this up a little bit and then hopefully wow you a little bit by showing you some of the template approach that you can take to flexible design. So I'm going to go into edit mode, which is where the magic happens. If you're an owner of a page or a site, you can do this for the home site. You can do this for various campaigns and whatnot. But if you look at here, this is a flexible section. To get to that flexible section, you just go into the section where you want to add a new section, and you'll see this new layout called flexible. I'll click it and I'll just drag a couple of things in there so you can start to see the grid. I'm going to drag an image. I haven't programmed anything. I'm going to grab an image from stock. Let's see what looks like a fun one. How about these two cattails that are in love? And then we're going to add one more kind of fun web part. How about the hero web part? How about a call to action? So as I start to layer these in, I can also change what it is that the background looks like. So over to the right here in the editing pane toolbox, I have the toolbox of web parts, some of the immediate images that are available to me because I mentioned yoga. You see how it's doing some of that smart lookup. Let's drag this one on there because that's fun to have. And on down here, when I get to the templates, that's where you'll find them. You can also do more things around theming. So, sorry, I clicked on the image, but I can change the background of this section pretty quickly. There's some designs that are already available to you. We'll go with something more green just so it pops. How about this one? That looks pretty good. I can change the background. I can do a lot of different things. And it really does take a little bit of playing with so that you can get used to how sections work and then really get into the value of how do flexible sections work. But there's a lot of options that you can go through here to get some design ideas, to get an accessibility assistant, which I know my colleague Jesse really likes, so that SharePoint pages are accessible more and more. And you can, of course, build that in. But let me show you what it looks like when you start moving things around. We're going to change the shape of this one to a hexagon so you can see some of the photo sections that we have. Currently, right now, it sits behind this text, which might be what we like, but you can also choose to move it to the front. So let's bring it forward. So now overlaps. This one, maybe we want to move over a little bit further to the right as a countdown to the Microsoft 365 conference. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just stretch this one out. I'm going to make this actually a medium size, and I'm going to move it all the way out so that when we're in off of edit mode, this will be at the bottom of the page. And then when I move this, you'll actually see that I also have control of how wide from top to bottom the entire section is. So there's a lot that you can control. Once you kind of have a sense of what you want to do and how you want it to lay out, you can really lay it out. And again, if I move something, you'll see the grid in the background that tells me all the different places that it can land, which is a lot more flexible than just 3 columns. And in fact, it's so much more flexible, it really does feel like you can put things where you want them to. So last thing I want to show you is if I do a new section and I just throw in here really quickly one of the new templates, which is down at the bottom, you'll see that you can really jumpstart into a new flexible section, change to your heart's content, all the different elements, making it square, moving things around. You know, it's really up to you, but they really help you get set with something that already looks nice, and then you just plug in your information and your details. So there's a lot that you can do with flexible sections. I'm going to republish this, and you'll see this page is immediately functional, it's feature rich, and if I hover over things, and I'll just do it to myself so I don't expose Jesse or Tiffany, this is a real people card, this is a real button that I can click so you can also go and register to the Microsoft 365 conference. And of course, there's so much that you can do within these pages. The last one that I'm going to put in here, just to show you it in action before we move back to some slides, is using the YouTube video with a particular video that I may still have in my copy paste menu. And this will be my meta point to invite you to the Microsoft 365 conference. Look at that. So this is a new video that we published, and if I go and republish it, it's now a fully functioning, very overlapped, not very pretty looking designed page. That's me, Mark Cashman here. So you can have fun with flexible layouts, but it really is meant so that you can build the sites that you want, make them beautiful, make them functional, and build the media-rich content right into them. All right, so let's move away from demo and back to the slides. I have a couple of slides, and then I will hand back to the team so that we can cover a little bit about what we're doing next from the SharePoint event that was at the end of January and hopping into the next part of what we already have identified as part of the SharePoint event, the SharePoint hackathon. So let me get to the hackathon slide. I'll take control, and we will move right into a little bit of payoff from what I just showed you. There's so many new authoring improvements, a lot of things that you can do with new web parts, section layouts, even section templates, full page templates, and of course a lot of the built-in photography that's available to you from a stock perspective, all the things with Copilot so you can rewrite on the text web part. There's a lot that the team has been doing, and there's a lot of things that you'll learn if you go to that microsite from the SharePoint event. There's other things that we've been working on, of course, that just navigating through, trying to get us going forward makes me want to forget to press play, but also just so you get a sense of these different looks and feels that you can get out of SharePoint. So let's talk about the SharePoint hackathon. If you have any hacking bone in your body, this has a skill set available to anybody. You could be a beginner like me. I'm not a hard code pro dev. I kind of know my way around the Power Platform, but I really centered around what you can do within SharePoint natively. But we have submission categories for everybody. We do really want to encourage you to participate, not only to view the webinars that I'll walk through, but between this entire event culminating into the what you create, we want you to try out all of these new features and functionalities to build out a page, to build out a portal, to submit it into the hackathon design team so that they can review it and pick winners and see who submitted for what categories. There's some great prizes that we can almost tell you about. We're almost ticked and tied with the legal team, but there might be some ways of getting you somewhere in having some fun with other people, maybe not in your hometown, but that's all I can say about it right now. But there's some really nice prizes. And to help you get there, there are some nice webinars that are really guided towards helping you understand what you can do with SharePoint today, from working with portals, working with agents, learning about Viva Connections and how you can build out what you want to be your main home site within Viva Connections, and then some of the things that might be available to you if you're a pro dev to actually build out new web parts and experiences using the SharePoint framework. These are all webinars that are meant to be informative and encouraging. You can, of course, if you already know how to do a lot of this, get started. Go read the rules, figure out the best way to fit the category that you want, and then submit. You can submit as many designs as you create. There's a really nice set of FAQs if you have any questions. And I encourage you to hit this link right now because there is a beautiful microsite all for the SharePoint Hackathon that Jesse and Aaron on our team built out. It looks great. It has all this information in triplicate because it's very nicely laid out. But these are all really nice webinars. Myself and Vesa Juvonen, if you know him from the community, our friend in Finland, he and I will be co-hosting and bringing in a lot of experts to talk about all of these different things. So that is my time talking about SharePoint agents, talking about flexible sections and all you can do with SharePoint and the goodness in your design bones. And of course, the SharePoint Hackathon, we hope to see you there. And as Tiffany comes back, I'll nudge us forward so we can learn about other events. And of course, we'll have a little time at the end to take any questions, and I'll dive into questions now in the chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. Big round of applause for Mark, everyone. Thank you so much. Jazz hands. But yes, Mark is such a great person at demos. It seems like the demo gods are always with him because he is always like without a hitch. He's always so cool as a cucumber. So I really, really appreciate it, Mark. Thank you for the two really great demos, SharePoint agents, as well as flexible sections. We actually have pretty good questions, especially one in Q&A that I really want to get to. So I'm going to get past my couple last ending slides, and then we can dive into our Q&A. Alrighty, so next upcoming community events, we have a Knoxville Community Day. I believe that's held by our friend MVP Daniel Glenn in Knoxville. That's February 27 to 28, so coming up very soon in 2 days. We have our various events in North America, MCT Summit in Redmond, Washington, Fabric Community Conference at Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, we just talked about the Microsoft 365 Community Conference, and Mark had his cool video. I think it was against Lake Washington, right? I don't know. I actually don't know what lake. So
that was Elliott Bay, right next to the Seattle skyline.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Puget Sound.
Sounds good. But yes, that was one of our lakes in Washington, and I hope to see you all there in Las Vegas, Nevada for the Microsoft 365 conference. And then TechCon 365 in Seattle, I personally will be there delivering a session as well as hosting the community lounge. So hopefully if you're in Seattle in June, you will visit me and Caruana there. Alrighty, so as Jesse opens up the open discussion, wanted to remind everyone that's viewing on demand, please drop your questions in the Microsoft Tech Community Driving Adoption event page to engage with us. We will be answering questions up to 1 week after today's event. So what's next? Our next call is March 25th. So the topic, we are actually going to have flexible sections. We had a lot of interest from this morning's call as well as today's call as well on flexible sections, the details. Mark did a great demo. We're also going to have the product manager responsible for flexible section named Caitlin. She will be coming on to do a deep dive on flexible sections and talk to you all about it. So before I open it up, I want to make sure you all share your feedback at aka.ms/Microsoft 365 champion call feedback. You can click on the link on the screen. Again, if you want to see any sort of topic requests, if you like the new format, any sort of feedback you have for us, good, bad, ugly, we will take it all. So feel free to do that. Join the driving adoption community, and of course, invite your colleagues to become a champion. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and we can get into questions. So I wanted to do the first one since it was great. This is the first time that we saw that someone use a Q&A function in webinar. So from Ben, for Mark, with SharePoint evolving as an app and platform, is there an overarching message about what SharePoint is now? We speak to different people who see it from different perspectives, e.g. information management, document storage, internal communications, team collaboration, and it'd help if we had a unifying message of when we talk about something being in SharePoint.
Yeah, I'll kind of steal from the recent event where I think each time we have a big event like that, we try to rev the understanding based on how we think about it, and of course, listening to the feedback and people understanding it. If you listen to what Jeff Teeper commonly says, he really looks at SharePoint as being the content service that powers Microsoft 365. And the maybe a little confusing part of that, but the benefit is it is also a part of one of those apps. So there is the SharePoint experience where you go build your sites and portals. And a lot of times the majority of people will engage in that way. That's the app side of SharePoint. The platform sometimes is not what we always talk about. We don't lead with that the loop file that you just created is stored in SharePoint, or the video while you're watching it is actually a video that's stored in SharePoint. There's a lot of elements when you start talking about things like knowledge management systems or communication services, and there's a role that SharePoint plays. But I think the most simple way to think about it is a content service for Microsoft 365. So from an admin perspective, that's a really good thing because it's stored in the right way. It's going to be performant for upload and download or page loads, and there's a managed experience for how you can govern your environment. When it comes to the end user, that's where I'll agree with you. There's sometimes the how do you explain SharePoint to an end user? It could just be the site that they use. It may just be the folder inside Microsoft Teams because that is a document library within the Teams user interface. And I honestly will leave you with one last thought of if you don't have to explain SharePoint, but you might explain a feature of another application. I think the best recent example is Microsoft Loop. I would never mention, except for when people ask it from an admin perspective, that there's SharePoint anything because I think it confuses the conversation. And the value really is, how do I use Loop? What can I use Loop for? And once you get beyond that, I use Loop all the time. And I, most of the time when I'm using it, don't think of SharePoint. But when I think about how do I manage a loop, where is a loop stored? And to me, selfishly, what makes Loop great is it's stored in SharePoint. So the short answer is mostly around a content service that is delivering this ability for other teams not to have to build their own SharePoint, if that makes sense. So hopefully, Ben, that got you a little closer to it.
Yeah. First of all, great question, Ben, and great answer, Mark. I think, first of all, I really, really like Loop. Loop is definitely one of my new favorites. Of course, I still use my OneNote, especially on my other device, but still. But yes, SharePoint is what powers a lot of our other applications to be possible. And I think it's like, for me personally, I'm not really as artsy as you, so I don't do like the triangles and stuff. I don't know, what is the right-hand side when it suggests, it's kind of like Designer, but it's not, it suggests prettier layouts.
Oh, design ideas.
So design ideas, yes. I use that main stuff because I'm not very good at making things look nice. So that's my new favorite. But yes. So before I go into the chat for questions, I want to remind you all to, if you wanted to ask Mark or myself or Jesse your questions, make sure to use a hand raise function and we can bring you online. You can ask this live if you like. And we encourage you to do so. All right. So there was a question earlier from Myra. Is there any talk about increasing the SharePoint storage service limit from 25 terabytes? Or any advice into avoiding going into view-only mode if we reach this limit besides deleting content?
Yeah, it's always a great question around SharePoint storage. I'll kind of preface it with that the team always looks at how are people using their storage, not necessarily looking at the content, but just being able to query the backend platform and to see which tenants are really full and, to kind of try to anonymize do we really need to give people more storage? And for some customers, the answer is yes. For the majority, and I'll just be transparent, sometimes it's a perception of what storage is needed. And with each site collection, as long as you're within your tenant limit, you could maybe design around multiple site collections to achieve the same outcome. But with the 25 terabytes per site collection, if you really hit that limit, There isn't a way out in terms of a big feature that we have coming up, but there is an architecture way to design around it. So again, thinking across multiple site collections, thinking about also archiving content and the life cycle management of content. That may be hard to do at the moment when you feel like you're running out of storage, but it also might be something that you start to bake into how you auto archive and how you take advantage of some of the ways that you can tune versioning. And there's lots of different dials, but we don't have anything to share around an announcement of the next wave of storage that we're going to deliver or the larger container sizes of site collections. But it is something that the team is always mindful of from a platform perspective, because at some point, some larger customers, even medium-sized customers, will hit their limits. And my last thing that I put into the chat is if you really are hitting a limit and you're seeing that read-only experience, it might be a good time to call the help desk or work with what we call Fast Track, and they can help you articulate through some of what I shared, but also a little bit more hands-on, so you can see a way out of what it is that you hit. But the thing that isn't going to happen immediately is just a bigger number for everybody. That architecture is something that's fairly baked into the core of SharePoint at the site collection level.
I want to do a +1 for Fast Track. If you are, I think if your seats is higher than a small medium business, so anything under, above 300, then you get free Fast Track help. Hopefully Jesse or myself later on, we can post a link to Fast Track, but a lot of people don't know about this benefit, but it's fully just a free, almost a free Microsoft service. If you're above about 300 seats, you can have them come in and help you. They're going to analyze your environment and see how you can better optimize. And yeah, so great benefit. But next, I know that Brendan was trying to raise his hand earlier. Did you have a question for us, Brendan?
It was a bit of an accident, but I do have a question anyway.
We'll call it a happy accident.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind just understanding, when would you use Copilot agents versus when you would use Copilot Studio?
Yeah, I think it's a question that there are probably people better than myself, and if Jesse and Tiffany have any thoughts, I'll give you the initial thought. As we started to introduce SharePoint agents, there's a spectrum of how you might go about creating agents. And so if you're building an agent for SharePoint, now I would tell you, build it using the way that I showed you today, because it's already built into the site structure. You don't have to build any containers. You don't have to deploy anything. It's just click, and there you go. The thing that I didn't share with you, because it's kind of a little bit of a time constraint by being able to do the demo, but when you're in the SharePoint agent edit mode, you can actually take that into Copilot Studio for a broader, fuller experience, so you can truly start to do some what I would consider more development for your agent. That being said, there's also a lot of surfaces that aren't SharePoint. So if you're wanting to build a Copilot agent for something that's connected to not just SharePoint, but maybe connected to Exchange or another backend service, that's really where you start to build in multiple sources that contribute to the grounding of the agent. And without getting too far over my skis, because I'm not a developer, that's where you would lean into starting in Copilot Studio, knowing your sources, knowing your endpoints, so where you want the experience to be for end users. And that's effectively going to be something that's a little bit more of a pro dev and deployment approach. And then right in the middle is still the Power Platform. The Power Platform has a lot of great agent-like capabilities that they're building into their Power Apps and Power Platform, not only to help you build a Power App or the Power Automate flow, but to also influence something that might appear in the flow of your work when you're working with the Power Platform. So it might be an agent that pops up and asks a question or is there to answer a question. I think we're getting a little bit better at talking about the spectrum of agents when we talk about the broader notion of Copilot agents. What I showed you is kind of already grounded in the right place if you're thinking about an agent that sits within a site, or like we showed you is a kind of a copy paste of a link to share that agent within a Microsoft Teams experience. If you're wanting to build something like an agent that lives as a tab in Teams, that would probably not yet be a SharePoint agent, but it definitely would be something that you could build out and deliver through Copilot Studio and the ways that you build out applications for Teams tabs. That's I can't give you the 100% answer, but that's about as much as I know. It's really that spectrum of agents and understanding where do I want it and what do I want it to do, and hopefully getting to that point as easy as possible. And if the answer is in a SharePoint site, then it really is just a couple of clicks.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for your
Mark.
question. Glad you accidentally had that thought.
I know Rosemary had a question. Great. Go ahead.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but it's on SharePoint agents as well. And just from a governance and security controls perspective, now I know it will respect the access to the documents that you've got as your source, but how else from a governance and control and a quality, how do you check that the agent's been set up correctly, it's using the most accurate information, those kind of things?
Yeah, it's actually part of what we talked about with the SELA team. So their process that they built in was ensuring that the content that they were pointing it to was up to date. So there's one element where you, as the business owner of the site, or even if it's not the site, the content collection, they actually really focus down, and they have one agent that's kind of, if you have any SELA question, anything that they have access to within that site itself, then you can program it that way. But they also have a specific one that's just for the field, that's on a smaller set of documentation that they've worked on refining, and they manage as a part of their job regardless of the agent. But when they put the agent in place, they did a lot of testing so that as they queried the agent, it was giving the accurate answer. And for them, they set the bar pretty high. I think it was a 98 or 99% accuracy. So it's not just the agent was having a hallucination. They wanted to make sure that their actual information that it had access to was accurate. I think the two parts that I would then lean in on that sort of is the same thing is making sure that if you really want something to be focused as a specific type of agent, an agent for sales, an agent for a campaign that you're working on, we have a big one that we created that was just for an internal show that we call Microsoft Airlift. And it's like everything gets created in about 3 months, and then almost immediately it's out of date. So we created the agent so that it could answer some of the simple, is there a session on this? Who's the expert while I have their attention on this thing? And then obviously for us, it helps with just the details about how the event is run. We pretty tightly coupled the agent to just a very small set of content, not the whole site. It may have achieved some of the same things, but controlling the content I think is key. And then managing it over time as you would manage any document from a search perspective. If I can search and find it, and you are concerned about me finding an out-of-date document, a list item that is no longer accurate when we get to enabling agents on lists, and on down through a normal governance approach, you should think of agents in the same way, because they are basically doing some really smart research on your behalf. And the more you focus them and the more you only have them available to look at certain documents and update them, maybe every 6 months or whatever the key information is, I think you have to build out a little human process into how you actually program the agent. From an IT perspective, it's just a file in SharePoint. So if ever there was a need to remove an agent, even if it was perfectly programmed, it did exactly what you wanted it to, but you don't want people coming across it anymore because everything is no longer relevant, just delete the agent and then, manage your content accordingly.
And so on that, because it's a file, you could also then restrict who actually can access that particular agent as well. Yeah.
Most of the agent's livelihood is going to be controlled by the group or however you manage access to your site. But if you manage down even further to whatever level, a document library level, a document itself, you set some classification to a certain level, like you had already said, it will adhere to that no matter who works into the agent. And actually, we kind of hit that as a fun prep to the demo. I had forgotten to give Jesse and Tiffany access to basically the bot, the agent. And so they're like, I tried it, it's not working. And I was like, oh, try harder. No, I didn't say that. It just was it was because I hadn't enabled them to access the site, which was a really good reminder. That's how it works. So to your point earlier, as much as you manage your content, Copilot, not just agents, but Copilot will always adhere to whatever your policies and access controls are, because no matter whether it starts in the site, will always go out and say, who is this person asking me this question? Do they have access? Let me check the Microsoft Graph. Yes, they do. Okay, I can provide an answer to them. That doesn't change, and we don't program it to work around any of that.
So, Mark, is it only owners or contributors that can create an agent? So if someone just had visitor rights, they wouldn't be able to create an agent?
That is correct. Yep.
Would they be able to use an agent?
They would. The only caveat is something that I saw we had in chat, which is if you have a Copilot license, whether you're the member, owner, or a visitor, you would have the rights to effectively use Copilot, aka use the agent. Within the promo, which starts to lean into how we're thinking about licensing for even people that don't have a Copilot license, but they just use your agent, it's on a transactional basis. You're still bound by the who has access to the site. If they have access to the site and there's an agent on that site, if they're a member or an owner, they can fine tune what the agent does or doesn't do or create one. But if they're just a visitor, like the intent for me when I invite people to the Interzone site, they're going to be a future guest on my show. They don't need to be a member or an owner of my site. But I would love for this agent to work a little bit for me so that if they have any preamble questions like, what's your show about, or how should I think about X or Y, they can always ask me, but, maybe a couple of less emails because the agent is taking care of it. I want them to be able to ask the agent if they know to and can. And there's a method to be able to do that. But if they're only a viewer on the site, they wouldn't be able to do any part of the demo that I showed you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So for everyone that's listening on demand, there is the promo that Mark was talking about. There's a promo right now going through the end of June 30th. It's at aka.ms/SharePoint agent/promo. And then Mark, I believe there's a requirement of the organization must have 50 Copilot licenses, and then there's you were talking about also limit on queries as well, right?
Yeah, there's the set pricing and how you establish it. You do have to set up an Azure subscription or whatever the right term is when you're setting up an Azure meter, because it is based on a transaction. So each time somebody makes a query, it sort of counts in the compute level. And the promo is mainly there to remove friction for you being able to test out agents at any scale. Certainly through the promo, if you use it just in a targeted fashion, you'll wouldn't need to spend a lot just to get a sense of, is this worth our doing? But it is also not to limit your pilot or your rollout phases or whatever. The only limit is by the end of the promo period, the rules and the price may change. I don't have the details. It doesn't mean that it's going to go exponentially up, but it'll basically become a purchasable component. And I believe that there's a broader notion, not just for SharePoint, to have basically this pay as you go. And I'm just going to type it in here because it's kind of a fun, the reference to it, it's called PayG. And it might sound like I'm making a joke because I'm super hip 50-year-old, but PayG is what they refer to when you say pay as you go. So you can actually learn a lot about Copilot and the PayG models that they have available. The promo link that they put into the chat is just specific to SharePoint.
All right, I think we are over time. Thank you so much, Mark. If you ever have the chance to meet Mark in person, he does these really, really great Q&As, and he does great dad jokes, and people offer him jokes all the time, and he I don't know how he does it, but he just seamlessly integrates them all. So again, if you ever have the pleasure of meeting Mark in person, ask him for a dad joke or ask him for a joke because he's great at them.
I'll try my best.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. Really appreciate you for coming on. You're plentiful in SharePoint knowledge, and your demos are great. Wonderful personality. We love having you. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. And thank you, everybody, for staying on and learning a little bit about SharePoint.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you all. We will see you in March 25th for our next call. Bye.